This is my second lecture on Death of a Salesman, and in this voice note I shall be talking about some of the central themes of the play, central issues of the play, one by one. Some of them are important and major and occupy great importance. Some may not be occupying great space in the drama, but nevertheless are seminal and interesting and correlated. Now, one of the signature virtues of Death of a Salesman and generally of Arthur Miller's work is its uncanny ability to speak to audiences all the time, across the world, and it does so with astonishing immediacy, with great clarity. The accessibility, I want to stress this word, the accessibility of Miller's themes and the multiple resonances that his drama gives rise to, we notice this very, very, very strongly, very notably in Death of a Salesman, and which is a play, among many other things, about a man who lives in a dream and mistakes it for reality. The author's characterization of Willy Loman, the central figure, has a way of covering, maybe monopolizing many discussions or most discussions about the play, and yet its position as one of the most significant works written for the American theatre should lead us to a number of other considerations as well. So, which means, not all concentration should be on the character of Willy Loman. There are other very important interrelated issues, and I shall be talking about them one by one. Of course, the first and the most important one, the most common one, is tragedy and the common man. Now, this is the subject of a major essay by Arthur Miller, and he wrote that in response to the critical reception of Death of a Salesman when it first reached Broadway in 1949. It is that essay tries to talk about tragedy as it might be experienced by the daily workaday working man. And the essay and this piece of critical writing, I think it displays Miller's huge proletarian ambition for one of the major themes of his play. Willy Loman is designed to be a protagonist who is capable of sustaining the scope, the depth, the sheer dramatic tension, which is traditionally associated with legendary figures from the vast, traditional, grand theatrical past. Miller conceives of Loman with his proletarian attitude, proletarian accent. He conceives it, nevertheless, on scales which are much larger. And this grand theatrical past will, of course, range widely and include figures from the heroic dimensions. For example, maybe Oedipus, Sophocles, maybe Lear of Shakespeare. Miller wants those figures to be also there in the back of the audience's mind. In Death of a Salesman, Miller's indebtedness to the shape of tragedy in this theatrical traditional past that I've just talked about, this is everywhere very clear. And another thing which is very clear, of course, is also his effectiveness in adapting the conventions of those tragedies to the scaled down economies of his world, of the modern world. The scale of things in Oedipus and Lear and the society which fostered it is not the same as the one Miller is talking about. And Miller does this scaling very nicely. In the story that unfolds, Miller makes an emblem, or emblematizes the inevitability of tragedy. Tragedy, which one of its great qualities is its inevitability. It must happen. Once the tragic machine begins, it cannot stop. It will roll down and crush everything till it comes to a stop. And before that happens, there's a huge loss. So this inevitability, this inescapability of tragedy is stressed by Miller, similar to the grand tragedies of the past. And he does this by concentrating on elements that are little and local. And then after giving these little local details, Miller plants in them, or one can even say discovers in them, a symbolic dimension, which is far beyond the anecdotal. Willie's story is, of course, in the first instance personal, as all tragedy is always personal, yes. Yet its resonance stretches far beyond any given time and any given place. Of course, the scene is Brooklyn, Willy Loman territory, but it's a different Brooklyn. It's a Brooklyn of, one can say it's a Brooklyn of the imagination, dramatically transformed. The second important theme which is found here is, of course, the American dream, the ideas of materialism, consumerism, and the relation of all of this to happiness. Now, of course, it is quite true. It is so true that it has become a truism, maybe even a bit of a cliche, to say that this drama, Salesman. I mean, from now I'll not talk of the entire thing as Death of a Salesman. I'll say Salesman, and that would cover it, I think. So that the Salesman represents the dark underside of the so-called American dream, and this American dream, of course, is a phrase which originated in the early 1930s. As the play demonstrates time and time again, that dream is likely to become a nightmare for individuals who are caught in between the dualities of a rampant and encroaching materialism and an ever powerful consumerism, which it implies, which is, of course, in a way, a corollary of the materialism. Happiness is equated in this world with material success. Anything which is less than being rich, if you are not rich, quote unquote, that signifies failure. And Willie fully buys into this myth, absolutely subscribes to it, as well as its deceptive corollaries. We find such statements in the play: be liked and you shall never want, look good and make an impression, be athletic, be nice, be manly, quote unquote. Now, this is the legacy that Willie hands on to his sons, handicapping any chance of both of them finding out what they might have become if they had been under the influence of a different father. They never find that out. The overbearing pressure of Willie as he transfers these ideas to his sons is too much. And Willie never realizes this until it is far too late, of course, that business is business, that business is a far more lethal game than anything he has ever had in mind. And the success that he thought of constantly and continuously eludes him. And, I mean, he also does not have any sense that the growing sort of corporate culture, which is very unsentimental, an unsentimental ritual of take and take all the time, and not give and take, this has already made things extraordinarily difficult for him. Willie also does not realize this that much. A third important thematic would be family values, or rather dysfunctional family values. Because Willie and his family, because the Lumans have built their life together on denial, on deception, and above all on self-deception, it is only a matter of time before fate or circumstances, whatever you call it, that will expose and undo everything that is being carefully arranged around them. And because they have never broken this cycle of denial and its deceptions, in a way they are fated, of course, to rehearse their dysfunctional family dynamics over and over and over again. They will fall on the same set of ideas and phrases to get out, and they won't. Biff tries to break through this sort of false value system that has corrupted him. He tries and then tries again. And of course, he finally succeeds. And when he finally succeeds in doing so, and one has to think about it. Does he really do so? Does he really succeed at the play's conclusion? Even if he does, the price that he pays is a very heavy one indeed. We know, we understand that. And this dysfunctional family values leads us to a sub point, related sub point, really, I mean, almost like a corollary, which is the great sort of generational conflict between the father and the son. Let us remember the last play that Miller had written before The Death of a Salesman is All My Sons. And in a very similar manner, the mighty antagonism in Death of a Salesman is embodied in another father and son, Willie and Biff Loman. And their battle too is a battle which is fought to the finish, because each represents a different version of what it means to be truly alive in this world. And the battle is all the more heartrending because each is emotionally bonded to the other. While Willie's love manifests itself in the form of an sort of unhealthy obsession, Biff's love has progressed from adolescent hero worship to something far more profound, something intangible based on his own growing self-awareness. To say that their relationship is deep and intense is a pathetic understatement. Built into it alongside this also is a wider generational conflict. The world that Willie has lived in is no longer possible. Times have changed. How is Biff to find a place for himself in this new world that no one, certainly not his father, has prepared him for? Willie too is perilously involved in a conflict with his father, a man he has never known. Please note his need to romanticize substitute father figures like his much older brother Ben and the mythic salesman Dave Singleman. I mean, he does that constantly in a search for filling up something which is a void inside him. This makes us go to the next important thematic point or thematic. The element of illusion, or maybe one should call it delusion, and the nature of reality which is portrayed in this play, maybe the madness of reality, illusion, and the madness of reality. Things which are there's a very strong element of the delusional in the play, because many of the key scenes in Death of a Salesman take place inside Willie Loman's head. These are illusions, of course, and as members of Miller's audience, as we watch the play, we also experience them as such. Yet they may be delusions too. For some of them, especially the scene where his son plans to hang a hammock in the backyard, may represent the past as Willie wants to remember it, not as it actually was. Willie's delusions in the real world are of a much greater concern. They have to do with his exaggerations about himself and his overvaluation of his sons. Yet, for Willie, the greatest madness of all is reality. The world that has changed all around him. They don't know me anymore, quote unquote. He sighs in what may be the only instance of self-awareness in this entire play. Related to this, of course, also is another theme, the theme of growth, growing old, or growing up. Because The Death of a Salesman is an unusual play in that it follows what one may call a double trajectory. On the one hand, and most significantly so, it shows the difficulty Biff faces and the psychological obstacles he must overcome as he tries to assert himself in reaching for his much-delayed maturity. But the play also demonstrates what it means to grow old in a culture that seems quite willing to pass you by. As, for instance, Charlie says in the Requiem, when you get yourself a couple of spots on your hat, that's when they start not smiling back and you know you are finished. In this dominantly male-oriented sort of guy culture that had commented or that I'd mentioned in the first lecture, women are marginalized. And that is also maybe one of the sub-themes of the play, the marginalization of women, the marginalized role of women. Death of a Salesman represents a male-centered universe. And that is readily apparent when you read the play. The women play predictably secondary parts, and that may be putting things quite mildly. They are even less than that. There is an office secretary, and worse to come, two call girls, and the women and the woman caught in adultery. And of course, this is not something promising or remarkable. Linda, of course, is a far more complicated personality. As one of the four major protagonists, she is in fact the only, what one may say, round character, fully developed female figure on board. Initially, in a way, assigned the satellite parts of wife and mother, wife of Willie and the mother of Happy and Biff, Linda negotiates a great deal of dramatic space for herself, and when she confronts her sons, and it is Linda, and Linda alone, who commands the empty stage, let us remember, in the final moments of the play. I'll stop here for the next lecture. It's about 16 minutes.